If you are looking for a new symmetrical mouse, you probably think of the Logitech Superlight or the Razer Viper V3 Pro. But what if I told you there is another company that makes amazing mice, and in some ways, they might actually be better. Today I will show you a symmetrical mouse from Vaxee and talk about its key features that can help you decide if it is the right mouse for you. First, I want to thank Vaxee for sending this mouse. However, they have no influence on what I say in this review. I'm not only a reviewer, but also a player. I have over 9,000 hours in CS2, and improving my aim is something I always work on. I have tested more than 50 mice, so I can share my experience about what makes a good mouse. The first thing I look at when choosing a new mouse is the shape. The XE V2 is the largest symmetrical mouse from Vaxee. It is 124mm long and 66mm wide at its widest point. This is a mid-hump shape, which means the highest point is in the middle of the mouse. The height is 39mm. If I compare it to the Superlight, the XE V2 has a more rounded back. This helps you get a more secure grip, especially around the thumb area. The Superlight does not widen at the back, which can make it harder to find the exact same grip every time you pick up the mouse. Another big difference is the hump. The Superlight has a very round hump, almost like a potato shape, with the highest point in the center. On the XE V2, the hump feels flatter. The Vaxee also has a lower front and a lower back. If you are currently using the Superlight, but feel that the main buttons or the back of the mouse are too high, the Vaxee mouse might solve this problem. By the way, my Superlight looks a bit strange because I covered it with Pulsar Super Grip to get a better grip, especially when my hands are cold. I've been using them for a long time and I can definitely recommend them. You can find a link to the Super Grips in the video description. The Viper V3, similar to the Superlight, also does not widen much at the back where your thumb rests. The sides are also quite straight, which can make the mouse feel less secure in the hand and make it harder to get the same grip every time. Another downside of the Razer mouse is the sharp ends of the main buttons at the front. This can be uncomfortable for people with longer fingers. The Vaxee XE V2 is used by several professional CS2 players. For example, Messi from Vitality, who won the last major, as well as Grim from Energy and Swisher from M80. Before I talk in detail about how the XE V2 shape feels for me, let's first look at some other important features of the mouse. The XE V2 weighs 59 grams, which puts it between the Viper V3 Pro and the Logitech G Pro Superlight 2. I know that today there are mice on the market that weigh around 40 grams or even less, but considering that this is a medium to large mouse, I think the weight is perfectly fine. In my opinion, it is better to have a slightly heavier mouse, but with solid build quality, instead of making compromises like the holes in the bottom, or a thinner shell that bends and can start to creak over time. Also, nothing rattles inside. Great job from Vaxee. The mouse shell is made from one main piece, which means there are no problems with bad fitting parts or sharp ends that could distract you during gameplay or cause discomfort. The mouse uses the 3950 sensor and supports a polling rate up to 4K. You also don't need to buy anything extra. In the box besides the mouse, you get the 4K receiver and a rubber charging cable. However, I do wish there was an extra set of mouse feet included. Even though the box content is very minimal, every item is packed very carefully, so nothing gets damaged during transport. It shows that Vaxee really cares about small details. You may have noticed that this mouse has a slightly different color. It's not pure black, but a dark grey color called obsidian black. If you like when your mouse matches the rest of your setup, Vaxee offers 6 different colors, so you will probably find something that fits your style. The XE V2 uses mechanical Huano blue transparent shell pink switches. They feel very good to use. They are not too light, so you won't accidentally creak them, but they are also not too heavy. The main buttons have almost no side movement. This is very important for me, because in stressful situations in CS2, I sometimes press the buttons quite hard. There is no creaking when you move them sideways, which means nothing distracts you during gameplay. These are definitely some of the best main buttons I have used. It's also worth mentioning that the buttons have a very minimal finger groove. Because of this, the mouse does not force your fingers into one specific position. This means the XE V2 supports many different grip styles. However, there is one downside. Because there is almost no groove for the index and middle finger, I noticed that, especially when my hands are cold, my fingers can slide around the buttons a bit. It slightly reduces the locked-in feeling. Another positive thing is that the front of the buttons is rounded. This is a big advantage for me, because I have long fingers. Thanks to this, there is no discomfort, like on the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro. The side buttons are placed at a good height, so even people with bigger thumbs should not press them by accident, like it sometimes happens on the Zowie S2 DW. They are also clearly separated from each other, so you will not confuse them during gameplay. In terms of design, they are not flat like on the Zowie FK2 DW, instead they are slightly rounded. This mostly comes down to personal preference. If I compare the side buttons of the XE V2 to the Superlight, I personally think the ones on the Vaxee are better. The scroll wheel has slightly more resistance than the one on the Superlight. I also prefer the material used on the wheel. It feels more secure when I use it. One downside for my large hands is the scroll position. It sits a bit too far back. In the next version of the mouse, I would like to see it move slightly forward. The scroll wheel is also quite loud, which for some people might be a disadvantage. For web browsing and video editing, I use Superlight, so it's not a problem for me. Next to the scroll wheel, there is also a small LED that starts blinking when the battery is low. On the bottom of the mouse, you will find two large skates, the power switch, and the button used to change DPI, polling rate and click latency. Because there is only one button for several settings, you need to remember the correct combinations. Fortunately, the mouse also has a web-based software, which is very clear and easy to use, without unnecessary settings. I personally like browser-based software, because you don't need to install anything on your computer. Inside the software you can change settings like DPI, polling rate and click latency. There are also additional options like trajectory, tracking mode and lift-off distance. There is also a custom keys tab, where you can change the function of the mouse buttons. If I had to complain about something, it would be the battery indicator. It only shows battery level in 20% ranges. It would be nice to see a more precise number, so you can avoid a situation where the mouse dies in the middle of a match. It would be also nice to have a setting that allows you to choose when the mouse goes into sleep mode. Speaking about the battery, it lasts around 38, 34 or 30 hours in competitive mode, depending on the polling rate. If you turn off competitive mode, the battery can last up to 110 hours. I also want to mention that right after I received the mouse, I had a problem where the battery was draining very quickly, about every 2 days. However, a firmware update completely fixed the problem. Charging the mouse from 0 to 100% takes about 2 hours, which is an average result. Now that I talk about all the important features, it's time for my experience while playing CS2. My hands are about 20.5 by 10.5 centimeters, and I have long but skinny fingers. I want to start with something that is a huge advantage for me, the sidewalls. On some mice, especially one designed for claw grip, the sidewalls curve inward toward the bottom. This makes it easier to lift the mouse. For me, however, I was never comfortable playing with my ring finger and pinky curved inward. After a few minutes of playing, it always caused discomfort, especially for my pinky finger. I play much better when my fingers stay flat on the side of the mouse. Because of my preferences, mice with angled sidewalls often feel uncomfortable and don't give me enough control. Of course, this may be different if you prefer a claw grip. The XE V2 has straight sidewalls, which is perfect for me. Flat sidewalls will be especially important for people who keep their ring finger and pinky straight while holding the mouse. Additionally, the flat sidewalls at the base of the XE V2 don't have slanted edges like the ones on the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro. This can matter for people who keep their fingers as low as possible on the mouse. Also, the sidewalls are separated from the main buttons. This means that even if my ring finger almost reaches the front edge of the mouse, there is no way I will accidentally press the right mouse button. For me, this is another big advantage. At the same time, the main buttons extend slightly to the front. Because of this, if you have long fingers and play with a claw grip, your index finger will not hit the sidewall. Once again, you can see how much thought Vaxee put into this mouse. The edge that separates the buttons from the sidewall can also be useful for people who use 1-3-1 grip, where the ring finger rests in that area. It shows that Vaxee really pays attention, even to very small details. Design choices like this work well for players who use different mouse grips. As for me, I experimented a lot to find the grip that works best with this mouse. I tried a 1-3-1 grip, the standard 1-2-2 grip, and also a tilt grip. I also tested whether it feels better to hold the mouse closer to my wrist or a bit further forward. My grip looks like this. Even though my fingers extend slightly past the front of the mouse, the rounded shape of the main buttons prevents any discomfort. Because the mouse widens at the back, the grip near my thumb feels more secure down on the Superlight. It is also easier to get a consistent grip every time, because the mouse feels very stable in my hand. However, with my hand size, this grip has one downside. The part of my hand behind the fingers is slightly in the air, which means I don't get as much support for the back of my hand. This can reduce stability when trying to hit a very precise one-tap shot at a long distance. Additionally, my aim can look a bit unstable, and I notice that my crosshair sometimes shakes. Because of that, I would like to see a mouse similar to the XE V2, but with a higher back. For that reason, this mouse won't become my main, because I prefer a higher back hump. Even with that issue, my headshot percentage in deathmatch is still very high. For some people, the lower back could actually be an advantage, because it allows you to pull the mouse deeper into your palm when making small micro adjustments. Overall, in terms of build quality, the Vaxee XE V2 is easily one of the best symmetrical mouse I have ever used, even if the shape is not perfect for me. So far this mouse has many advantages, but unfortunately, there is one downside that could be a problem for some people: the price. The XE V2 costs €160 plus additional shipping costs, because the mouse can only be purchased directly from the Vaxee website. To be fair to Vaxee, new flagship mice from Logitech or Razer also cost around the same price at launch. The difference is that after a few months, their prices usually drop. In the case of Vaxee, discounts like this never happen. Even though this is a fantastic product, I would still like to see top gaming mice become a bit more affordable in the future. To summarize, it's clear that Vaxee knows what they are doing. They pay attention even to very small details that can affect comfort and performance. This is definitely a top tier mouse, easily S tier. If I had to suggest one improvement, it would be a better battery life in competitive mode. I would also like to see the scroll wheel move slightly more forward. Besides the XE V2, Vaxee also offers several other mice. At this point I would like to ask Vaxee to add more exact mouse dimensions to their website, because I couldn't find them. I also like that they create new and unique shapes, like the NP series. The more shapes we have on the market, the better the chance that every player can find a mouse that fits their hand. It's great to see the mouse market evolving and new shapes appearing, instead of seeing another clone of the Superlight or the Viper V3 Pro. Click the video on the screen to see the most used keyboard among CS2 Pro players. See you in the next one. Bye!